said that the salami slicing would be showing the CCP's hand in terms of like what they intend to do with Taiwan. Is practicing the blockade also showing their hand? And if so, how do you think that Taiwan, the U.S., Japan, these other countries should react to that?
No, that's a really good question. I'm not being facetious at all. I think that's a really good question. And I think for a long time, the U.S., Japan, Taiwan uh, haven't really thought through all those aspects of it. Um, so let me throw out the scenario for you. So we all know that when Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the things that Putin said was, if any foreign forces interfere in Ukraine, I reserve the right to use basically nuclear weapons. That's basically what he said, right? The commander of United States Strategic Command said that he believes that Xi Jinping will use the same logic when and if they decide to invade Taiwan. Now, if they for the same scenario, if the PLA say the same thing for the blockade, uh, what is the U.S. going to do? Are they going to try to break it? And are they going to risk that? Are we going to play dice with the China last threat scenario? We talked about earlier. This is the last time we warn you, uh, and risk nuclear war. Or are we going to, or are we going to, play chicken and say no, they're not going to do it, and we're going to try to, resupply Taiwan. So I also think that the blockade is going to be an interesting scenario because, you know, China is dependent on many things from Taiwan. It's not just a island with a bunch of wild natives. I mean, Taiwan has lots of sophisticated technology that they sell the rest of the world, including computer chips. So the scenario of a blockade would have to be modified to allow certain things to get in and certain things not to get in, and same thing, certain things to get out and certain things not to get out. So that it would be pretty complicated for them to manage that, and the PLA and the CCP have to deal with that. On the other hand, the U.S., Japan, and Taiwan need to figure out how to deal with this blockade scenario, and I'm not so sure that's been fully fleshed out.
So, what did the U.S. and Japan and other countries and Taiwan learn from the PLA's military exercises that they did, sort of in response to Pelosi's visit?
That's a good question. So since their profile that the PLA did was seems to be blockade related, um, they kind of showed their hands. For example, uh, during the exercise, they communicated with their ships, with their airplanes, um, with their headquarters back in mainland. So a lot of that information is being examined and analyzed by the West, and to understand how they do command and control of their military. And once the U.S. and other countries understand how they do that, then that command and control can be manipulated or destroyed or jammed or denied, for example. So each time the PLA does something, they might be thinking that they're, being aggressive, but they're also exposing themselves to watchful eyes that are looking at what they're doing. Another interesting occurrence was that there were some reports in the Chinese press that the J-20, which is their stealth aircraft, was flying around. Now, again, it wasn't noted much in the Taiwanese press, but it's quite possible that the Taiwanese radars picked up that stealth aircraft. Of course, they wouldn't admit to it, but if it was flying around and the Taiwanese radar did pick it up, that is a weakness that they might not even know about. So if they decided to use their stealth aircraft against Taiwan, now Taiwan has, for example, potentially a way to, they know what the profile is, or they know certain features of this stealth aircraft, and they can take it out if they need to. I mentioned the submarines earlier. That probably the PLA submarines were probably detected and monitored. Also, the missiles, when they fired the missiles, first of all, um, the location where those missiles were fired from um, gives information about in the future where they might be fired from in the future. So if, for example, Taiwan wanted to counter those missiles, if things started heating up and missiles started landing on Taiwan, well, Taiwan also has missiles that can reach out and touch the mainland. So they could do counter strikes against those locations where those missiles were from. And so by knowing where some of those missiles came from this time around and where they could come from in the future, that gives away an idea for the Taiwanese military, as well as should the U.S. and other countries get involved. Again, this information is useful. Um, so I think you know it's always good to watch what the PLA did. Another thing that besides the command and control is to see how, let's say, the ships maneuver and how they communicate with each other. Um, uh, so between ships, between aircraft, is another thing. It's not necessarily command and control, but it's also um, procedures of how they maneuver in this kind of space. As I mentioned, the Air Force didn't really show up with a lot of aircraft. Well, that could show that maybe they don't have a good command and control system that's effective with lots of airplanes. So they might be this might be a weakness they might expose during an invasion, is they can't handle a lot of aircraft, whereas Taiwan has several hundred fighter aircraft, and that might be an advantage for Taiwan.
Hmm. I mean, you mentioned Putin's nuclear threat, and I mean, is Putin's nuclear threat? Do you think that's the reason why Western countries haven't actually sent their militaries in to defend Ukraine?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it was a NATO decision, and I think it was probably pushed on NATO by the U.S. Uh, it might be a bluff, but we've believed the bluff, and so we're not doing what Putin we're doing what Putin asked us to do.
Right, but isn't that then the problem? I'm not arguing for nuclear war because that would be horrible. But here's my question: like, if the CCP threatens nuclear war, if the U.S. were to defend, or any country were to defend Taiwan, then like you basically are handing the CCP control of the situation, right?
Correct.
And so, does the U.S. have to risk nuclear war in order to stand up to that, or is there some other way to handle it?
Well, first is it might be a bluff. They might not be willing to conduct nuclear war. As you probably know, the Chinese don't really have that many nuclear weapons right now. They have about 300 plus nuclear weapons, and then if you include their submarines, so I mean, one nuclear weapon can make a bad day for anybody. But compared to 3,000 plus that the U.S. has, so for now, and as you know, the PLA rocket forces, strategic rocket forces, are building silos in central China, 300 or so silos with missiles that could have up to three or three plus warheads. So that's another 1,000 that they could have in, let's say, five or so years. So right now, I don't think nuclear war is in play if China were to threaten today, because we could pretty much make a bad day for them. So, and I don't know if China is willing to risk nuclear war. But on the other hand, we live in a democracy, and if the U.S. population feels that strongly that they don't want to risk a nuclear war with China, and they don't want to risk Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, or other West Coast cities, although some people wouldn't mind them going away, or Hawaii for that matter, Guam. So it's going to be a political decision, but with the CCP, they don't need to worry about what the population thinks. So um, again, I think this is a challenge that we're going to have to face at some point in the future.